Welcome, everybody, to yet another panel at OnyxPathCon. I am Matthew Dawkins, one of the hosts of this panel, and the conceptual designer, that's a term I've never used before, for the They Came From line of games published by OnyxPath Publishing. Really happy to see so many people in the chat already. I know most of them are going to be Europeans based on the fact that we're broadcasting this early in the morning for Americans. But, you know, solidarity with Europe in that case. So before I get into introducing my co-panelists, I'm going to talk a little about the convention. And that is obviously you are tuning in for OnyxPathCon, and part of the purpose of OnyxPathCon isn't just so that you can hear my lovely tones talk about games, but also so that you can play in games and run games even. And you can do that by going over to our website that will be routinely linked in the chat. And I really recommend you do it if you've got a spare few hours today before Sunday runs out. Even if it's just a couple of hours, I recommend going on the website, setting up a game or joining a game. And something I've been encouraging people to do is run games you're unfamiliar with and title them as something like Demon the Descent, just getting the hang of the rules. Because you will be amazed how many people gravitate towards it, not so that you can all play a deep involved game, but so that you can all talk over the game and how to learn it. This is a really good opportunity for people who are new to a game to get together, discuss a game, buy a copy of the PDF or two, talk it over. You know, it just gets people together in a way that they don't normally do. Plus, this convention has a charitable element. The Bodhana group, who use RPGs as therapeutic tools, are essentially the people involved on that end. And every single game you participate in, a cut of the money you pay to play goes to the Bodhana group. And that number, the amount that has been paid to them, has been going up and up during the course of the convention. They're a fantastic charity. You can, of course, just donate to them directly. If you don't want to participate in any games, that's fine too. You just need to go onto the Bodhana Group's website. It's BODHANA, that's Bodhana Group, and you can donate to them. Finally, and then we'll get into the subject of this panel, OnyxPath, over the course of this convention weekend, has a load of RPGs at massive discounts over on drivethroughrpg.com. If you want to see what discounts we've got going on, and there are lots, just go over to DriveThruRPG, look for OnyxPath. You will see those bundles advertised, and it is a bundle of games in PDF. You can get a big deal going on this weekend, so please do that. So, with all that said, and notwithstanding, welcome very much to the They Came From panel. My name is Matthew Dawkins. I am the in-house developer that oversees They Came From, along with a bunch of other games. They Came From was my initial kernel of an idea that has expanded and become its own awful beast since then. And I'm joined by two of my lovely, lovely colleagues who have written with me on multiple They Came From games at this point. And in one case, in fact, in both cases, you have co-developed books with me on the They Came From line. And in one of those cases, it is a brand new game that we haven't even announced yet. So we will get to that during the course of this panel. So I'm going to introduce one of the panelists, and then that panelist can introduce the other panelist, and then we would have done a nice loop. So first things first, Michele, please tell the audience who you are and why you are here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michele Masala, and a lifelong OnyxPath fan who worked on Mommy the Curse second edition, on the Heroes from a World of War supplement from They Came From Beyond the Grave, and on They Came From Classified. And
yeah.
That's why I'm here, apparently.
Well, that and something else that we'll get into in a second.
I don't want to spoil things. I'll leave that to the higher-ups.
All right, then. And who is that at your side? In Twitch form, anyway.
The one is the one and only Barker.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I am Barker, and what am I doing here? I asked myself that a few times this morning, actually, and I'm sure that won't be the last time. I also love Onyx Path. I've written for Night Horrors, Shunned by the Moon, Werewolf the Forsaken was my first foray into the fire. Mummy the Curse as well. They came from Beyond the Grave, and they came from Classified, and they came from NDA Farm, the farm where we grow all the non-disclosure agreements.
And what book did you co-develop with me, Darker?
Oh, yes. I'm in the midst of co-developing Monsters from the Crypt with Matthew Dawkins. It's the Fiends and Foes supplemental for They Came from Beyond the Grave.
So let's get straight to the exciting announcements first and foremost. So first one is something you may have already heard about if you tuned into some of our earlier panels, but I will clear that one now. They came from Classified. So for several months now, we've been advertising this game that we've been working on as They Came from Classified, with the name essentially redacted. A lot of people have been guessing at the subject matter of They Came from Classified. What is Classified here? What kind of media is it talking about? And of course, we have revealed this convention that They Came from Classified is a game about spy movies and spy media. So if you're a fan of James Bond, Austin Powers, The Avengers, John Steed and Emma Peel, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Champions, Get Smart, all of these various media are packaged up and stuffed and renamed to avoid copyright issues into They Came from Classified. It's been a huge amount of fun to work on. We will talk about it rather somewhat during the course of this panel because everyone here worked on it as well. And to my mind, up till now, it was the most fun They Came from to work on. But it isn't the only They Came from that is being worked on right now. There is another one we are announcing right now in this panel. And I'm going to allow Michele to announce it and, in fact, give a bit of an introduction. Give a bit of an introduction to why it should be you that announces it.
Well, as it went, basically, They Came from line offered me the chance to tap into love of lots of old movies which were formative for me. I love sea monsters, so They Came from Beneath the Sea provided that. I love classic horror, and I am obsessed with Vincent Price and Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee. I love slasher horror, so They Came from Murder Lake also helps. And I also enjoy a lot spy fiction and all that. So one day I was with some spare time and figured there's still a tiny bit of my childhood that needs to have its own tribute in the They Came from line, which specifically is mythology and fantasy flicks, the 80s, 90s one, because as of my age. So I tried to pitch for a game about those topics, and that went well. And it's about our next game in the They Came from line. They came from the Cyclops Cave. And it's happening, and we're just started to write it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. If you've enjoyed movies starting from the Ray Harryhausen and flicks like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad or Clash of the Titans, of course, and or some movies from a bit later like Conan or Dragon Slayer, Cruel, and even flicks from the 90s, because those were the one that marked me in my childhood, like Cena, and a bit of Dragon Art, Lady Oak, Willow. It's going to be there, and I think I love to make the pitch, and seeing that happen and take shape, it's being really, really cool. I think you're going to love it, and that's the big announcement for me. It's me stepping up into the development of the role and doing that.
Well, you did it magnificently. Yeah, so initially, with Camp Murder Lake being a source book for Beyond the Grave, it's not its own core rulebook. So Classified was going to be it. We were going to do 3 They Came From core books, and then we were going to re-examine how we were doing They Came From, whether we were going to do a big compendium in a Dark Eras style of lots of micro settings and archetypes and so on, or whether there were other ways around it. And then we got this pitch in from Michele, and it occurred to us that, well, we had considered fantasy before. It was an aspect of fantasy we hadn't really considered. We didn't just want to make, I guess, story path fantasy, and there is a certain fantasy element to Trinity Continuum Anima. So you don't want to release 2 games on the same subject matter, simultaneously. Anima's got its MMORPG aspect that's medieval fantasy broadly. And then we started talking about it, and we thought, okay, well, how can we expand this? And where our visions were previously, I guess, locked in on certain decades, because all of the They Came Froms have a decade feel to it, or a decade or 2. Beneath the Sea is the 50s. Beyond the Grave is the 60s and 70s. Classified is 60s and 70s. And Camp Murder Lake is the 80s. You've got this fantasy one, and we were thinking, well, we can't really pin it down to a set decade because of the way fantasy evolved in media over the course of the 20th century. So we kind of moved away from that restriction and thought, okay, well, how can we present fantasy in every way until it actually starts looking good? Because part of the fun of They Came From is playing with media that is sometimes a bit wooden, a bit hammy, a bit cheap. And when you start getting into the Lord of the Rings movies, for instance, not the Hobbit movies, we all know they are dross, but the Lord of the Rings movies, that starts getting taken seriously again, and you start getting into Game of Thrones as well. So we kind of start in the 30s and in the mid-90s, around Hercules and Xena time. So you get everything from Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Clash of the Titans, Ray Harryhausen, stop-motion monster flicks, all the way through to the more sword and sorcery, grim and gritty, Sword and the Sorcerer, Conan the Barbarian, Red Sonja, all the way through to the more campy early 90s although the 80s were certainly camp as well, with Legendary Journeys of Hercules and Xena, Warrior Princess. So we've got a lot of ground to till in that game. And They Came From the Cyclops Cave, because primarily it has a bit of a Mediterranean feel to it, simply because of the nature of a lot of the classics in fantasy. But it's by no means restricted. We don't prescribe a setting in this game. You can go into your own medieval fantasy world if you wish. There's absolutely nothing stopping you. But we love the title of They Came From the Cyclops Cave. And honestly, as soon as we thought about it, I could start picturing what the art would look like on the front cover. I've got a very clear image in my head. And usually when that happens, when you can start picturing things based on a title, that tends to be a good path. So those are the big announcements, but now we can dial back a little, and I would actually start asking some of the panelists some questions. And so let's start with you, Barker. So I guess this is a bit of an obvious question, but firstly, I'd like to know how you came to know the They Came From line, but also what kind of movies really drew you to working on it. What was your foundation that made you want to work on these sort of movie parody RPGs? Because you have worked on several of them, as you mentioned now.
Sure, and you offered, I had received the outline and had planned to write for They Came From Beneath the Sea, which I wasn't able to write for that one. And that's, I think currently, right now, save this moment in your brain hard drive, That's my biggest regret as a freelance writer, is not just doing it, just diving in and doing it, because I feel like every following project would have been just that much better and that much more. There's just do all the projects you can do. Anyway, for They Came From Beyond the Grave, does anyone else sometimes say they came from beneath the grave? Because that also makes sense, right?
Yeah. Some people do. They're fools, but but they do.
I'm here on behalf.
Some people
of all
say
the
they
fools.
came from beyond the sea, like Bobby Darin or something.
Beyond the Sea. Yes, that's actually a good one for the fantasy game as well. That would be a good name for that. But no, I'm here representing all the fools in the chat as well. So if they're a fool, they should call themselves out as well. They Came From Beyond the Grave was one of the games in which I had bought a lot of Hammer horror films because I had seen stuff. I had grown up seeing, I have vivid memories of these marathons, Halloween marathons, and every single year they would play Tales from the Crypt, the movie from the 70s. And that was the first recommended mandatory reading or mandatory viewing that you included in the outline. And that was really exciting to me because I just love that storytelling nature of like different little exposés of different people in different situations, different morals to the story at the times. But it was more that project was more buying a bunch of Hammer horror, downloading, like watching on YouTube, the free stuff I could find on YouTube or Amazon, just to find ways to view this stuff. The thing that the moment when it really struck as me was Classified, because I had grown up 007 Days of Bond, or the Bond TNT marathons, or like Spike TV or something. Like they would always do these marathons and they would show Goldfinger 9 times and then Moonraker a couple times for the people who like that sort of thing. And Tomorrow Never Dies 0 times, which we should talk about our favorite Bond movies and how they just get cast aside far too often.
Far superior to its predecessor.
I think so too. I agree. I think Tomorrow Never Dies is vastly underrated. It's not my favorite. Listen, this is what everyone in the chat signed up for this morning. This is not a They Came From panel. This is 20 minutes of They Came From, and then 40 minutes of what everyone's favorite and least favorite Bond films are.
Well, let's get into that now. I mean, we've been holding off for 20 minutes now, near enough. Getting on to the big questions of our favorite Bond movies. Classified is obviously a very exciting game that we're working on, but the crucial factor isn't a question about what cinematics are going to appear, what are your playable archetypes. The big question is, what's your favorite Bond movie? So, Barker, what's your favorite Bond?
Okay, Bond or Bond movie?
Oh, we'll do both. Okay, who is your favorite Bond, and what is your favorite Bond movie?
See, I
would have expected you. I would have expected you to know this coming in.
I'm ready.
I
know,
but I can understand why it's a tight decision when you put on the spot like this.
It also depends on the day and the moment. So I'm gonna say, I'm just gonna double down on this. Timothy Dalton is my favorite Bond, and Tomorrow Never Dies is my favorite Bond movie.
Bold choices. A little George Harrison is my favorite Beatle.
Yep, there's a little bit of that in there. I knew that was coming. That's why I was debating. I was like, should I be the one that says Sean Connery, or should I be the one that says Timothy Dalton? No, you're going to say Roger Moore, so I didn't want to step on your toes.
I'm not going to say Roger Moore. Christ. Michele, what about you? Same question. Different answers, I hope.
My surprise is, yes, Daniel Craig is not that surprising. He's a solid Bond. But my Bond movie is In Her Majesty's Secret Service. So that's my niche choice there.
Okay, so Daniel Craig on Her Majesty's Secret Service. That would have been a different movie, wouldn't it?
Yes.
A lot more brutal. Would have, I know the sort of revisionist historian of movies looks at George Lazenby and says, "Oh, he was all right. He was a good Bond." No, he wasn't. He was not a good Bond. He was okay because he acted, but he wasn't James Bond. I'm sorry, that's categorical. However,
I just got off the phone with
I just like the movie.
MI6.
I just like the movie.
I want to know if we have any Lazenby fans in the chat. But
press L for Lazenby, please.
So in that case, it comes back around to me. Movie Thunderball. Although From Russia with Love is very close, I think From Russia with Love is the best spy movie out of the Bond oeuvre. Whereas Thunderball, I can always watch Thunderball whenever it's on. I will always happily sit down and watch Thunderball, despite its seeming marathon-like length. Yes, Lago on the Disco Valente yacht. A very unsatisfying death, as the deaths get increasingly extreme over the successive movies. A harpoon to the back is nothing compared to what happens to Mr. Big, Kananga, and Live and Let Die. But my favorite Bond, it is a tricky one. I think I'm probably going to have to go for Timothy Dalton as well. And it's mostly through an adult's rewatching. I like Daniel Craig, but I find him a little too cold, whereas Timothy Dalton seems more angry. And I'm not sure why he's so pissed off all the time, but he is. And it's easy to think of Timothy Dalton just through the lens of License to Kill, but Living Daylights is a very good movie as well. Anyway, let's see what other people in the chat are talking about, because this is now the James Bond panel. We've got I don't hate GoldenEye, people saying.
Say something nice about GoldenEye. Hey, do you want to wait till the end of the panel? Do you want 30 minutes?
Okay, you want me to say something nice about GoldenEye? It spawned a fantastic Nintendo 64 game that makes the movie succeed in spite of itself. If that game hadn't been released, no one would have decided GoldenEye was this pinnacle of Bonds. It isn't. Admittedly, it's one of Brosnan's better Bonds, but that isn't terribly stiff competition. The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day are dreadful. I saw The World Is Not Enough in the cinema, in fact. There we go. We're getting into OnyxPathCast meandering territory. So anyway, Roger Moore is always a lot of fun, of course, and there are some good movies in the Roger Moore collection.
Yep.
Spy Who Loved Me, mainly. So anyway, let's actually talk briefly. Michele, perhaps you can recall you've already mentioned, what kind of drew you to the They Came From games, as you were a fan of all these movie genres. Yes. So would you be happy to talk at all about some of the content of Classified? I know you ended up working across quite a spacious part of that book.
I wrote a chunk of that, yes.
Yeah. What can you tell the audience about Classified?
About the parts I covered. Okay, Classified. I think spy fiction. I love spy fiction, but among the They Came From line, it's not my favorite. But I think Classified is the sharpest book we have to date in the line. I hope for Cyclops Cave to top that, but so far Classified is really sharp. The cinematics are great. The archetypes which someone wrote with the excellent tropes and everything are also amazing. And both the scenarios are really fun. I had fun working on that. And I also put quite a bit of references here and there, even in the system chapter. If you spot them all, you'll win a free copy of GoldenEye right from Mr. Dawkins' collection. And
I have a pyramid of them under my house. It's like a weird anti-shrine. I collect everyone's golden eyes by breaking into their houses, stealing them so they can't watch them anymore. Streaming was the death of my pilgrimage and crusade, honestly, but that doesn't stop me from trying.
And what I think makes Classified different from Beneath the Sea and Beyond the Grave, it's that you obviously don't have the monsters to fight against. For example, the antagonist chapter is not a list of monsters. It's each one specific villain with its background and everything. And I think Classified is very distinct because it's fittingly quite glamorous. There's a lot of that vibe, that style that makes those movies great and fun, and also the strange part, the absurd part of the genre that lead into media like Austin Powers of Archer are there, and you can run it either way. So I think it's a really good one.
Oh, well, I'm glad you think so, and I'll get Barker to speak about the archetypes shortly. I see from Weird Hamster we got a question: are there only human monsters in Classified? So the way the monsters in Classified are divided up is in dossiers. So it's like here is your Manila wallet with this villain detailed. I'm looking forward to seeing how it's laid out. Honestly, no pressure to Mike Chaney, but the fact is, in most Bond movies, it isn't just a Bond game, it's also the Avengers, it's also, as I mentioned earlier, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. So you also have cyborg villains, you also have villains with utterly ridiculous, ludicrous plots, like I want to take control of the weather. That's from the Avengers movie, as in the Ralph Fiennes, Uma Thurman Avengers movie. That was a Sean Connery played villain, in fact, in that movie. Dreadful. Saw that one in the cinema as well. So they're not just humans, but most of the antagonists, minus just generic KGB agents and SMERSH operatives and stench agents and things like that, all have names, biographies, missions associated with them, with the idea being that each of them can basically create a campaign all around them. One of the biggest strengths of the Bond franchise, or the strongest Bond movies, is the strength of the villain. And in that way, Bond is very much like a superhero. Batman is defined by his villains, Spider-Man as well, and Bond too. If you have a Bond movie with a forgettable villain like For Your Eyes Only, it's a decent movie, but no one can remember who the bad guy is, so it never ends up at the top, unless one of you is about to chime in and say who the villain is in For Your Eyes Only. Nope.
I don't remember. I'm just here for Blofeld.
Christopher Walken, right?
No, that's A View to a Kill.
Oh,
that's A View
I always
to a
mix
Kill.
those up. They're the same, right?
Which is one of my favorite Bond movies, despite it being A View to a Kill. Oh yeah, I mean the Bond, Roger Moore in it is awful. Well, he's just, the wig on his head is sadly very pronounced. But anyway, Barker, let's talk about the archetypes in Classified. We haven't spoken about them yet. What can you play in They Came From Classified?
Okay, so oh wow. Okay, neat. This is really cool because I didn't realize that there would be so many cool like announcement type things in this panel. I just showed up. I'm one of those Americans that woke up at 6:30 this morning and has been spending the last hour choking down coffee.
Europe, it's 4 p.m. for me.
When you talk like this, I think it's it's when you're trying to remember a line on a play or in TV. It's when you say now before you start speaking, or yes, drink, remember.
Yes.
So I've got
excuse me. Well, I'm just
having
one more actually.
So having given you that time. Well, I can start you off if you like.
Oh, I'm ready, but you go ahead and start me off.
All right. Well, my favorite archetype in Classified is the Quartermaster, who fills the scientist professor vibe from the previous They Came From Cause. I mentioned on the OnyxPath Discord yesterday, it is sometimes quite tricky to make not only an archetype that is unique for the game, but also unique among They Came. We don't want to repeat types particularly, because in theory you can cross these games over. So we have the scientist, and then we have the professor, arguably the same thing, but let's excuse that. And now we have the Quartermaster, who is your inventor, your gadgeteer, and a lot of fun. You can play them out in the field, of course. They're not just back of the office queue types. They are the kind of person who is likely to be a bit cyberwared up and flying in experimental helicopters. So that's a lot of fun. So what are the other four, Barker?
Well, just to add there, it's fun playing the Quartermaster as well, because there are options to put them kind of in the thick of their deployment zone and take the stereotypical queue and cover them in camouflage and netting and put them in the field. And that always seemed like a neat. I always like it when Q pops up in the place where Bond happens to be, whether that be, right before an ambush or as the rental car facility, like kiosk. That's Tomorrow Never Dies there, I believe. Do bring it back in one piece.
Yeah. Do you remember in Hot Shots Part 2, Ryan Stiles' character was basically a Q in the field? For some reason, he had a boxing glove and a Jack in the Box at one point.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Why did you put that as recommended viewing for writers? Hot Shots Part 2.
I only just remembered the movie.
I've been trying so long to forget. Underneath the pyramid of Golden Eyes is a pyramid of Hot Shots Part 2s. No, those are, I'm sure you believe. I'm going to move on. I'm going to jump into the Adventurer, which is the first one here. That was one of the ones I was nervous about going in, because I didn't have a lot of experience in the type of character that doesn't necessarily work for the agency full time, but just happens to be sucked into their machinations every single mission. The person who is just happens to be there, and yet is the one person required to save the day, or to break the operative out. And
yeah, this is the Emma Peel style character.
What are other examples of adventurers that you like? Because I know you like Emma Peel. I had never seen the Avengers, that initial series, before writing for Classified, and now I watch it all the time to my spouse's chagrin. But
most of the A-Team are adventurers. I don't think we actually put it down as recommended viewing, but it's a similar thing. Pretty much every one of Bond's I was about to say accomplices, his sidekicks, who inevitably die by the start of the second reel, are adventurers. Sometimes he'll be paired with another Ministry individual, but most of the time this is a local guide, or this is a woman who knows the evil organization. So, and then they end up dead. Hopefully they won't end up dead in your game of Classified, but they might, and if so, that's fine. You've got cinematics to reverse that. Yeah. Indiana Jones, I see being referenced as well. Yeah.
Yep. That's.
I think Lara Croft fits very well. She's rich and she likes to go on adventures, and the tropes Barker wrote fit her perfectly.
Thank you. I think that was the most difficult one for me, because it was such a new entrance into the Avengers. But I mean, the next one is the Operative. That's the one that everyone is expecting immediately. That's the face, the suit, the Bond character, the John Steed character, that is as good at getting out of their last breath as they are, going all in at the Baccarat table. And I tried to bring out both sides of the character, because anyone can be a gunner. Anyone can be a medic. Anyone, you can kind of specialize here or there, if that's the way that you play a game. But in a game like Classified, it felt important to, or any They Came From game, to ask yourself, like, how do you do this? How do you go about doing this thing? How do you go about accomplishing this objective? And I think that we came to some really good conclusions and choices that made the operative as much about being, in a swanky casino filled with smoke, drinking their gin and tonic, which is my operative's proper drink. Shaken or stirred, it doesn't matter. Squeeze of lime. As well as, again, jumping out of planes and scuba diving into aquatic layers and, disabling enemy nuclear bombs. And then
what do we
next,
have left?
We have two more. And yes, because you mentioned the quartermaster, we have the provocateur. Which do one of you want to enjoy explaining your favorite provocateurs or your favorite parts of the provocateur? I always feel like
you want to take that one, Michele?
The provocateur is a bit difficult to explain with examples from protagonists of Bond movies, because those often tend to be the Bond girls or the villainous women. The seducers femme fatale. Usually the archetype in Bond movies tend to fit women characters. Going forward, we have example of male provocateurs, but essentially it's the archetype of people who infiltrate Mata Hari style and seduce, deceive, and at least by default are more socially oriented archetype than others, where, for example, the quartermaster is more on mental abilities, and at least by default, because of course you can personalize them as you want.
That's well, I think you might be the person who told me in the chat, and that really opened up my eyes to the provocateur, was that James Bond is a provocateur. There are a lot of Bond characters that are provocateurs, and that was like, oh man, wow, this person is really a social engineer, right? The ability to swipe key cards and, cut into a dance and waltz with the right person in order to gain key information.
Yeah, I'd argue that Bond is sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No, thank you. Provocateur in the first half of the movie. Then he switches to operative when he tears apart the secret lair and the weapons. But yes, that's a way to see it, at least for me.
One of the things I particularly like, again, looking through that Bond lens, is different Bonds fill different archetypes. Roger Moore is certainly more of a provocateur than Timothy Dalton, who is more of an operative. And in fact, some of those later Roger Moore movies could even be called the quartermaster, because of how heavily he relies on technology rather than any kind of espionage ability. But who is up last in our list of archetypes, Barker?
Well, one more thing. Well, just one more. Just one more thing.
Oh.
Just one more archetype is the detective. The detective is the Columbo type character, well attuned to people, their missteps, how to gather clues into one final climactic puzzle piecing reveal that puts the enemy against a corner and proves that they're guilty in a variety of things that probably they don't even realize they were guilty of. But now here we are. I think George Lazenby's Bond might be a good detective, because they do so much work investigating the base in the Alps. But this is the person that accesses autopsy reports, medical files. This is the person that has connections with law enforcement, or a team that's ready to ambush the volcano fortress when all is time. This is the person that has private clients, that isn't just working for the agency, but is too good to let go and is always contracted by MI6 or whoever it may be. This is the kind of character that you don't necessarily want to stand directly next to, because of the Sims level aura of green cigar smoke and 2 weeks since the last shower coming off of them, but you're happy that they're on the case with you because they're the ones solving it.
Lovely. Okay. Well, that's covered an awful lot of classified. I will just briefly speak a little more about what you can expect to see. We, of course, have the usual array of, well, I say usual array, it's a completely different array of cinematics and quips. Cinematics, well, we like to keep some mainstays across the various they came froms, the deleted scenes, the missing reels, the kill the extras. They're very popular. We like to introduce new ones for each game. And classified is absolutely chock full of new ones, which in our game that will be starting in approximately 15-20 minutes, not on this channel, but look on the schedule. I think it's on Vorpal Tales. Then you will be able to see some of those cinematics in action. Plus, we have some lovely twists and fiendish plots. These are new kind of cinematic powers that we've played around with, and they came from Camp Murder Lake and have really brought to the forefront of classified. So what I like to tell people about that they came from games, they are eminently crossoverable. There is nothing stopping you system-wise from moving archetypes from one game into the next or pulling cinematics from one game to the next. But every single core book introduces something new, and it isn't just a setting, it isn't just a tone. You will always get something new mechanically out of every single one without it becoming bloat, because each game is its own article. So let's go back to Cyclops' Cave, Michele, because I think people like hearing about archetypes. And I know I will preface this by saying that we are only in first drafts. That means anything we talk about could change. We as developers, Michele and I, may look at it and think, you know what, this doesn't work. That's perfectly fine. But right now, what ideas are we looking at for our Cyclops' Cave archetypes?
Okay, I'd like to start by saying that unlike the previous They Came From games, Cyclops' Cave has 6 core archetypes, so we are better already. Let's just put that out.
I'm in competition with myself.
Well, the archetypes, we really didn't want to make They Came From game that's based on other RPGs. So you won't see the classes we are all familiar with in a way or another. But you'll see archetypes that cover those roles and even more, I say, because I think we have at least a good bunch of ideas that don't happen at all or frequently in other games. We can expect to see the sort of mighty warriors or blessed by the gods or demigods in a way, despite not being Scion, that are often the protagonists of these movies, as can be those more mystical types in that sense. Plus, it's difficult to describe because we went from some really nice curveballs that cover aspects of those movies very well, but I think it's a bit too soon to talk about that unless you think otherwise.
No, you're my co-developer. If there's things you don't want to mention, it's just the audience can hate you for it, not me.
No, I wanted to say that perhaps characters you wouldn't see in other games as often, like but are in those movies, like the titular character from Willow. You can it's one of the characters you want you to be able to play in there. The characters from The Princess Bride, you can they can be there, and you can have expect the pathos, the muscular bravado, the excessive drama, and the glorious description of fate and doom, like what the late Mako says at the beginning of Conan. You can expect them in the text, in the cinematics, and in the archetypes as well.
Yeah, we didn't want this fantasy game to just be about going around and killing monsters. We've got a lot of killing monsters in Beneath the Sea and Beyond the Grave, quite frankly. And so part of the challenge with Cyclops' Cave is finding a way of accessing fantasy in an interesting way, in a new way, but still feels true to the genre. And so that's so we're looking at things like looking at things, for instance, like romance in fantasy. The Princess Bride is a very good example of that. It's an extended journey, much like the Odyssey, in fact, of someone trying to get to the person they love and going through a hell of a lot of hell, quite literally in the course of the Odyssey, to get there. And so I think we have presented a lot of things. One thing I will spoil about Cyclops Cave that I'm damn certain we're not going to change is one of the interesting ways we're using cinematics in this game. Namely, that I felt like with Classified, we had kind of reached a point with cinematics that any new cinematics we invent are going to start either remaking the wheel or are going to really be, I don't know, very much scraping the barrel. And so we needed a different way of presenting cinematics for Cyclops Cave. And one of those ways is magic. This isn't a game with a Vancian magic system or any complex magic system at all. It is portraying magic through the lens of special effects in a movie. So the explosiveness, the visual style of the effect is what affects the cost of the amount of rewrites you need to put into purchasing it. So, for instance, if you want an invisibility spell, that costs one rewrite. It's very easy to edit you out of a film and just shoot a background with you not there. But if you want something like a fireball, as an example, or a lightning bolt, well, if you want your lightning bolt to look real, the rewrites are going to cost more. If you want it to look like someone's drawn a lightning bolt on the reel, that is going to be slightly cheaper and less effective. So it's a way of making magic a part of the game, but also leaning heavily into that entire meta idea that we keep going on with. They came from that magic. Of course, it doesn't exist. This is a movie being made, but you as the players can add magic if you're prepared to spend your rewrites doing so. So with that said, we've covered a lot of ground. We've got about 10 minutes left, and honestly, in 10 minutes, we're supposed to be starting an actual play of They Came From Classified. So what I will do is say to the audience at this point, if you have any questions at all about They Came From, or about any of the movies that we've spoken about, or movie genres, then ask them now in the next few minutes, and we will get to as many of them as we can. While I'm waiting for these questions to come in, please preface your question with the word question so that I see it more clearly. I will say that, let's play favorites then, everybody. Let's play favorites with games that are finished. So we can't name Cyclops' Cave. I know, Barker, Michele, you have both said Classified is, you think, the sharpest game. Is it your favorite They Came From game at this point? So, Barker, holistically, what is your favorite They Came From game? What's the most likely one you would run?
Definitely Classified, just because that's the one that I feel I'm the most natural to, seeing all the films. I'm really excited though for Monsters from the Crypt. I'm excited to run They Came From Beyond the Grave with some of those new cool monsters. I didn't know we were announcing stuff, so I'm not even sure what's allowed. This is so naughty.
Do you remember any of the monsters from the Crypt?
I do. Can I name one?
There's a challenge. Yeah, you can name name a handful.
It is interesting being a dev when something is sent to editing. Sometimes it feels like it's sent to the moon on a spacecraft, and you have to wait till it gets back. There's so many books coming on. There's so many books being written.
Yeah.
I like the dead grasping hands. I love in movies when there are just hands upon hands coming out of a cemetery or reaching through bars and grates. I'm really excited for that mixture of environmental / actual monster type of enemy. I'm really excited to run that one.
right, lovely. And how about you, Michele, then? Your favorite they came from so far, and you can't name your own one.
It's far. I think that it's not an easy choice because I love horror, but I love sea monsters more. So it's From Beneath the Sea for me.
Good. And is that the one you're most likely to run?
I'd likely run horrorish kind of Beneath the Sea, of course, yes. But fish is fun, so that's just the one for me.
So Classified I agree with my fellow panelists. I think it is the best written one in terms of voice. I think it feels like the cleanest one in a way, but I think that's natural when you have a lot of core rulebooks following a system. It's natural to streamline. It's an iterative process. My favorite one for things like conventions, my favorite one to run is Camp Murder Lake, which of course is a source book to Beyond the Grave. I just think the slasher movie genre is perfect for conventions. There are, of course, lots of other role-playing games that can do it, but Camp Murder Lake is specifically set up to do it, and I think it does it really well. And I understand we had a fantastic Camp Murder Lake game at this convention too. I think that was on Vorpal Tales channel, so you'll be able to check back and watch that. But yeah, Camp Murder Lake is among my favorites, and I think with Camp Murder Lake being a part of Beyond the Grave and the fact that we had Heroes in a World of Horror too, I know we've got 6 archetypes in Cyclops' Cave. We're going to have to add even more if we're going to beat Beyond the Grave, because Beyond the Grave has got 5 in the core book, 5 in Camp Murder Lake, 3 in Heroes in a World of Horror.
Yeah, I wrote 3 archetypes. I can tell that now. It's been a while.
Yeah. It's strange that the horror genre seems richer with protagonist archetypes. Some games are harder to actually find at least 5 unique types of personality as a lead, but horror didn't really have that problem. So the main question, let's see, we may see Camp Murder Lake in this year to sell or as Kickstarter, asked Squid Hamster. I don't think Camp Murder Lake is going to be on Kickstarter because it's a source book. You never know, it may be, and it's a big source book at that, but I imagine it will be released directly to drive through. I would love it if we got a traditional print run, but it really depends. Beyond the Grave, however, is still available to pre-order. All you have to type is "They Came from Beyond the Grave RPG" into Google, and you'll find out where to do that. So let's see, what other questions do we have? Someone wants to know all of the archetypes for Cyclops Cave. I'll name one of them. We've got the Sage. The Sage is both lore master, inventor, magician. So that is your learned type, your scientist, professor, quartermaster type. Following that, the mental character in more ways than one. Hot Dog Wizard says, do you recommend using Beyond the Grave or Camp Murder Lake to run a game based on Chud? Barker. Would you use Beyond the Grave or Camp Murder Lake to run a Chud game? That's the Weird Al Yankovic movie, isn't it? Chud?
Listen, I wish I could drink coffee while Googling it. I'm going to say Camp Murder Lake. That way you have to talk.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go for Camp Murder Lake because it means you've got to buy Beyond the Grave and Camp Murder Lake to run it.
Cool. It's worth saying that the reason I think that Classified is getting so much critical acclaim in this panel is because every single game is written on the shoulders of the game before. It's only good because the previous game was that good, and that game was only good because the previous game was that good. All of these games are so good. I have Beneath the Sea in front of me, and I plan
good man
on my calendar to weep that my name is not in the front matter. But
I've got the cards.
Oh,
yeah. So, Michele, which of these games would incorporate movies and TV shows such as Godzilla and Ultraman? I know you're a big fan of big monster movies. Yes, so, which would you use to incorporate such kaiju style
I
movies.
think Beneath the Sea fits the best, and also already includes between the core and Monster from the Deep. Includes a fair bit of quite cool cages, and between giant elbows and colossal centupuses and giant turtles. And I think it's the kaiju one. It's that one.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't like to forget Beneath the Sea. It's easy to do because it was the first, but as Barker said, every game is built on the last, and Beneath the Sea set the mold. And I still think it does what it does very, very well. And it shows it's popular. It's a gold seller on Drive-Thru-RPG. And if you don't have a copy of it yet, please do pick up a copy. It isn't terribly expensive. And you can order a traditionally printed copy from your friendly local game store. I very much recommend doing that because it helps us keep books in traditional print and helps us support retailers. So one last question before we check out and get ready for our next game. I'll have to write it in about 30 seconds. So let's see. We have got Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers. Thank you. Yeah, that's Chud. Yes, of course. I'm looking for questions, but there may not be. Here we go. From Celador Mythica, I am wondering if the storytelling system could be used to run a retro cartoon style RPG. If so, what system would you use? I would, so that would be Toon, basically. And the Toon RPG is, in a similar sense, it is very similar to They Came From, in that you are making a cartoon. So you could use the story path system quite easily for it. I wouldn't say any of the They Came From games as they currently are match to that more zany style of humor. Beneath the Sea is, I suppose, closest, but cartoons, I imagine you could use Classified for Saturday morning action cartoons, your G.I. Joes, very easily indeed. You could use Cyclops Cave for your Masters of the Universe and Thundercat style cartoons very easily. For old vintage cartoons where it's a more limited cast, Mickey Mouse, Tom and Jerry style, I don't think we have anything quite like that at this point. So I'm going to say Beneath the Sea so you can get the book and work from there. Just pick and choose the bits you like. It certainly has the cinematics that match that most, the very grainy quality of movie. Last question is from John Burke, who says, why didn't you hire Steffi Devan for that book? Steffi has, in fact, been on Some They Came From, so less of that. This is a joke recurring from the V5 panel yesterday, where Steffi was complaining she wasn't on Chicago by Night. So... well, in fact, no, she wasn't. Everyone else was. So with that said, thank you very, very, very much, all of you, for watching. I really appreciate it. We have got a game to be getting to on the Vorpal Tales channel of They Came From Classified. I am going to part by saying, please pick up a copy of They Came From Beneath the Sea. Please pre-order They Came From Beyond the Grave if you want. Please also sign up to games, run games on our website. Please also donate money to the Bohana group. We would love for that figure to go up and up. We'd love for it to exceed our goal, smash through it. It would be brilliant. We're doing this, well, in large part for charity, and would love it if you rewarded our time with a donation to the Bohana group. That would be so fantastic. And finally, check out on drive4rpg.com OnyxPath, because you will see a whole load of bundles there that you can basically back and get tons of games in PDF format. It really is worth your while. You can do that this weekend, so do not miss out on that. Thank you so much to my panelists, Michele and Barker. And thank you to Steve in the background running tech. We are now going to wave awkwardly as we say goodbye. 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 Goodbye.